Forgetting about this. Good morning and welcome to the Senate Executive Departments and Administration Committee. Our public meeting dated April 6th, 2022. We're going to start the day by opening the public hearing on CACR 21 and recognize the prime sponsor, Representative Silber.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Senators, for allowing me to make this presentation. I feel like I'm really the low man on the totem pole when you see all of the distinguished judges here today speaking on this. CACR 21 is once again I don't know whether it's the 7th or the 9th attempt at cleaning up the constitutional reference to registers of probate. It passed the House Committee 20-1, and it passed the House, the full House, on 294 to 43. There's a statement of the New Hampshire Judicial Branch. I'll hand out my version. I think there may be a slightly updated version, if I may hand this to the...
Please hand it to our clerk, please.
Basically, what the statement does is goes through the history of the reorganization of the judicial branch, and that in 2011, the legislature eliminated the duties of the Register of Probate, and that CACR 21 would complete the process by removing the references in the Constitution to that constitutional officer. Right now, people run for, get elected as Register of Probate in each of the 10 counties. They have no office, they have no secretary, they have no duties, and so it's really an obsolete thing. The conclusion that I highlighted on the last page, after you go through this whole history, which is sort of interesting, the question of what duties registers of probate should retain was openly discussed and addressed in 2011, when the legislature concluded that they cannot and should not have a role in the operation of the probate division of the circuit court. Given the current centralization of virtually all probate court functions and the limited involvement of clerks in probate matters, there is no role registers of probate could provide that would not conflict with the current structure of the courts. Some of the other supporters here, I believe that the judicial branch has perhaps a slightly updated version of this, but I think the conclusion is the same. I believe that Judge Gordon has a slight amendment changing making sure that the references to the sections of the Constitution are properly done, because the original version of the CACR misses one of the, there's two references in the Constitution. CACR only mentions one, and so this amendment, which we would probably ask the committee to adopt, would correct that oversight. So basically, this is sort of eliminating, could be a reference to buggy whips in our Constitution. It's an obsolete thing, and it's just a matter of cleanup. So it's really very simple. We have some distinguished judges here that will speak further on it, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions if I can.
Thank you very much for your testimony this morning, Representative. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Reagan?
So my question is, why the opposition to this bill? What do people think they're losing by the elimination of this position?
Well, the opposition was really in the form of virtually a very, very small number of people, one individual in the committee and a small number in the House. I believe that the concern that was expressed in testimony was that the registers of probate are supposed to oversee the preservation of records. But that's really actually done by the Division of Archives, and the clerks coordinate with the Division of Archives, is my understanding. So that was, to me, the only thing that was brought up.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you for your attention. Oh, by the way, I am Norm Silber, State Representative from Belknap District 2. Thank you.
Okay, next I'm going to call Judge David King. Good morning, Judge.
Good morning. Madam Chairman, members of the committee, my name is David King. I'm the Administrative Judge of the New Hampshire Circuit Court. I was appointed 32 years ago as a probate court judge, and I'm actually the only probate court judge left in the state of New Hampshire that's not retired, because we've eliminated probate judges. And I've testified on issues involving registers of probate over the last 15 years, probably more than any other topic. This is, I'm happy to say, the first time I've ever testified after crossover on one of the constitutional amendments. So although we've had many of those over the years, this is the first time it's actually had legs. Just really briefly, the Register of Probate Office was created back in 1694, and it was an appointed position back then, but in 1877 it became an elected position for reasons which we've outlined in our documents that we've submitted. In 1983, the legislature converted a town and county-based court system to a state system. I was fortunate enough to be in the legislature in 1983 and was on the committee that oversaw that, and we didn't deal with the registers of probate at the time because it involved a constitutional amendment, so they basically came into the new court system as elected officials. I joined the court as a judge in 1990, and I can tell you, since I became a judge, the registers of probate as elected officials have not worked. I mean, it's been an issue that I've dealt with for my whole career as a judge. The elected registers, when they were full-time employees being paid state benefits, set their own hours. We had one register who was elected from the nursing home in Sullivan County, actually a resident of the nursing home, and she was the elected register of probate. I had one register of probate that was elected in, when I interviewed her to find out why she ran, she said she had a nephew on probation and she thought this would be an interesting job, which obviously the register of probate has nothing to do with probation. And that's back when they were paid. In 2011, we created the circuit court. Senator Carson, you'll remember, you were vice chair of Judiciary, and we had a lot of discussion about registers of probate, and you'll see from the transcript of that hearing, my testimony was if they never show up for work, that will be fine with us. We basically eliminated their duties, cut their pay back to $100, and we were completely transparent about it. None of the registers who were in office at the time took a position against the bill, and we just decided that we'd go through a few election cycles and come back and make another run at the amendment, and here we are. We've been through 5 election cycles with this new system. We've had primaries and elections 5 times. Senator Prentice, in your county this year, the election, the register of probate in the general election was elected with 170 votes. And the register of deeds in the same county got over 47,000 votes. So people don't know what the probate registers are, and they basically, as you can see, they don't vote for them. About 3 terms before that, a fraternity brother from Dartmouth was elected register of probate in Grafton County, and the second place winner that year was Keggy the Kegger. They got the second number of votes for register of probate. We have only one register of probate left who was a register before the circuit court, and that's Terry Peterson. She's the clerk of the First Circuit Court, and she runs essentially so that nobody else runs. But if she were here today, she would tell you that in the last almost 11 years, she's done nothing in connection with her duties as a register of probate. And it has been mentioned by Representative Soba, we're now essentially have centralized all of the probate functions. And there are some stats in the materials that we've handed out. Our phone calls are all answered centrally. You can see in 2019, we use 19 pre-COVID numbers just because they're more accurate. We've given you the case filings. Our call center took over 46,000 probate calls, and I don't think an elected registrar has taken any calls. And as you can see, the probate calls take longer. They take generally over 5 minutes. There's a letter attached, which is just an exemplar of the good service that our information center provides self-represented people who are trying to navigate the probate process. When we went to electronic filing, we eliminated 10.7 full-time equivalent probate staff members because we've essentially pared down the duties, and the circuit court has saved the taxpayers of New Hampshire over $60 million in 10 years from personnel, basically from personnel costs. So I'm here to tell you that it's not 1694 anymore, it's 2022, and it's time to finish the job that we started back in 1983. I don't think there's any good argument now in favor of keeping these elected registers, and I would respectfully hope that this committee would approve the constitutional amendment and we can finish the job that we started back in 1983. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Judge King. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none?
Thank you.
The chair will call Representative Gordon.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, for the record, my name is Ned Gordon. I do represent Grafton County District 9. I also chair the Judiciary Committee in the House, where this bill was recommended as ought to pass by a vote of 20-1. I can tell you, as speaking from my past position as a judge, it was clear prior to the development of the circuit court that we were management heavy in the court system. We had basically 3 people effectively doing the same job in 3 different courts: the registered probate, the district court clerks, and the family division clerks. And the circuit court combined those functions and saved the state a ton of money in doing so. It was redundant and certainly not cost effective. So they were combined. In addition to that, as already has been referenced, the probate function has largely been consolidated right here in Concord. So instead of having judges in every county having to rule on matters and having in large part, probate matters can be resolved and dealt with specifically at one location here in Concord, particularly with e-filing. So there is really no longer a need for registers of probate, and I think that this is an appropriate remedy, and that is to take it out of the Constitution, because we still find ourselves in a position where we have to elect them even though there's no particular purpose for them. I have an amendment today, and when this came out of the House, it referenced one particular article, and that's the article that effectively requires us to have registers of probate. But there is a second reference in the Constitution to registers of probate, basically prohibiting them from representing clients. And that second reference in the Constitution was not addressed in the bill as it was presented in the House. So I have an amendment. The amendment simply clarifies that and removes that reference from both parts of the Constitution, and I'll hand out that amendment.
Thank you.
That concludes my testimony.
Thank you very much, Representative. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much, and see you later.
We'll see you at 9 o'clock. The chair will call Representative Lynn. Good morning, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair and representatives of the committee. My name is Bob Lynn. I'm a state representative from Rockingham District 7 in Wyndham. And I just want to very briefly make 3 points. I'm a strong supporter of this legislation. And I think the first point I would make is I think you've heard testimony already about the fact that the probate register position is basically a non-starter now. They really have no duties. So one of the things you might be saying to yourself is, well, what's the big deal? Why do we need to do this? I think it really is important to take this out of the Constitution, because although I have all along, even when I was with the court, been a strong supporter of what was done by legislation to remove the probate register's authority, basically, and incorporate that into the clerks of what is now the circuit court. At least in my mind, there's always been, was there really, this was in the Constitution, were we kind of you know, we sort of playing fast and loose with the Constitution, even though it was very important that I think that this be done, and that's why I supported it. In other words, the legislation to make the change. But I think it really is important to have this return to the people and let the voters have an opportunity to vote on this. And I think it should be. I hope the voters will decide that it really should be removed from the Constitution because the position has no function. And one of the things that I think is really important to understand about the old system is by having elected registers of probate. And, you know, the analogy that I drew when I testified in the House, and I think it applies here. Suppose that, you know, the Senate, suppose that the people that provide the services to you, your clerk and your sergeant at arms and other people on the administrative staff of the Senate, suppose that they were elected in their own right, and they could basically say to you, you know, you say, look, I'd like you to do this, or I'd like you to perform. They basically say, you know, listen, I have my own constituency. I'm elected. I can kind of do what I want. I think you'd find it intolerable to be able to perform your duties, and in a sense, that was what faced the court system with the elected registers of probate. And I just give you one example, which is kind of notorious. There was a register of probate who, for a very long period of time, essentially was collecting a state salary and spent his winters in Florida. He worked, he simply didn't show up for work over a long period of time. And that's just kind of one, that was probably the most notorious example, but it kind of, sort of spells out what I think exemplifies the problem of having someone that was supposed to provide sort of an essential function to the court system, but was, because of the sort of independence, if you will, stemming from election, felt free to sort of do that kind of thing, and it was very difficult. I mean, it was very difficult for the chief justices at the time to really do anything about that. I remember having discussions with Justice Broderick and Justice Delanis. I think that was, I'm not positive if that had resolved itself before Justice Delanis became chief, but for a long period of time that was true, and it was really a terrible situation. So I think that's just one reason to emphasize why it's important to have this move forward. Hopefully the people will also vote to support this, and this really what is an anachronism can kind of be removed from our Constitution. That's really all I have to say. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has them.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your testimony, Representative. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none,
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The chair will call Representative Horrigan. If you have written testimony, Representative, please paraphrase, do not read it.
Oh, yes, which is just as well, because one of my objections to the bill has actually apparently been met by an amendment, which I haven't seen, but that was, there was a technical flaw with the bill, which was that there's two references in the Constitution to the Office of Register of Probate, and it only deleted one. Mm-hmm. There's another technical flaw which can't be addressed by a CACR, but there's many remaining references in the RSAs, and so the office would continue to exist until sometime as a companion bill was passed. There had to be a trailer bill at some time, which could have been done this year with would have had included a provision that things would only kick in if the CACR was approved, and so I mean that's I'm actually in favor of keeping the office. I'm aware of the problems. Not all the elected registers of probate have been wonderful, so I've heard some of those anecdotes before, and I learned some new ones listening to the testimony, and also I took a copy of the history of the register of probate. But that's not necessarily an argument for getting rid of any office. There's been lots of bad reps who don't do their job. There's been a few bad senators. There's even beatification of bad judges being appointed. We had an infamous case. I guess I don't need to mention her name, but like we have a House bill that came over to the Senate, which was the result of a bad judge who was not doing her job correctly. So that's not necessarily an argument in and of itself for getting rid of this elected office. And so most of the ones we have elected are good people. We even for several years had a former Speaker of the House, Representative Donna Sitek from Salem, although she actually ran because she wanted to abolish the office. So I don't want to. So maybe I should not have mentioned her name. But yes, we've had some. The group we have includes some fairly distinguished people, and people are voting for the office. And I'm not sure about the anecdote about supposedly a Sullivan County register who is in the nursing home. I do know there is a former Stratford County register who had been a rep from Sullivan County, who's an older woman who I think is now in assisted care, but that was after she served as register of probate. So, and so I have a little history there, which is pretty similar to the longer one you have here that the judicial branch prepared for you. I'll skip to the end. A bit of a history here is this amendment is the same in every detail. Well, CACR is introduced. 21 is introduced to CACR 8 in 2017, which failed to pass by a vote of 6 yeas and 11 nays. And although a lot has happened since then, I'm not sure if any of it changed the calculus on whether or not this office should be eliminated or not. And 16 of the 23 senators who were in place back in 2017 are still here. So there's unless some of them change their vote, it would get at least 11 no votes, because 11 senators who voted no are still here, which is enough to kill the amendment. And as I said, it's been a constitutional office. That's correct. It's been there since 1877. It's been there in one form or another since 1694, before our state was a state. And they operated analogously to the registers of deeds. I guess it was a somewhat smaller office with fewer fees. That's why they may have had more operational issues than with the registers of deeds. And certainly a register of deeds are also one of the elected offices where not all the registers of deeds have been wonderful, but most of them are good. And then in the 2011, we effectively eliminated the probate court. We made it part of the circuit court system. And I'm not really sure if that was constitutional, but it hasn't been challenged in court, and I certainly agree with the judicial branch handout when they talk about what a fine job they're doing. I think the probate court system, all those functions are, the people are being served well, and so those positive statistics are favorable. But I think there still is a place for a register of probate in that scheme, and there have been some attempts in both the House and Senate to redefine the job of register of probate and make them do more than what they do now, which is not very much. Actually, in 2017, the same year we had that constitutional amendment, we did pass a bill which specifically empowered the register of probate to work with the state archivist, and that's the state archivist in turn has adequate funding through the fees that it collects. And of course, so even though this amendment is a little better than it was before, because it does at least eliminate both references to the Office of Registers of Probate, I don't think I would still oppose passing the CACR at this time. And if it does make it through the Senate with the sufficient number of votes, I certainly plan to vote against it. Vote against it at the when my opportunity comes in November. And I guess I forgot to introduce myself. So I'm resident Timothy Horgan. I'm represent Stratford County District 6, the towns of Durham and Madbury, and I'm a member of the Judiciary Committee, and I was the one person in the 20-to-1 supermajority, which has been mentioned several times. But I'm still reasonably confident that I was correct and the 20 were incorrect, even though I know there's a strong case to be made for that side of the argument. So that's all I have to. That's what I have to say about this. So I urge you to vote no, and I'd be happy to take any questions if you still have any.
Representative.
What? What's that? Excuse me.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. All right, thank you. So,
Was there anyone who had anything else to add to the arguments? Seeing none, the hearing is concluded. Thank you. Nice job, man. I didn't know you had the technical skill. I mean, I know you're a professional and tradesman and all, but that was still pretty. So I finally found the fluorescent tube covers. Lowe's has them. They do. But they only have 8-footers. See, so. No 4-footers, probably 2 or 4-footers. You have to cut the, I mean, the stuff you can cut it with scissors. Yeah. So it's probably just like a heavy plastic. It's not even heavy. It's really pliable. So I bought 2 because I need 2 sets of ends. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. There you are. No, this is this. This is an, yeah.
Here is the second sign-in sheet for that bill.
For this bill. Okay. Yep. That's their culture. I mean, I was shocked by it, and I was reading the book at the time, and there it was. Yeah, that's fine. Young people, because biologically you have to have the children, but you're going to continue to work. Yep. Yeah.
It responds to the emergency. Any remaining problems created by the emergency are managed, and that must be an active role, not to acquiescing to whatever the governor chooses to do. Emergency was handled. I think even if people believe
Last night I had finished senior summer covered the medical MRI and covered in the service. Now, it's all healthcare. We have pagers and we run over to the ambulance and jump on. Oh, it's called District 10. We call it, that's how I got started. St. Michael's line in this neighborhood. The telephone operator would dispatch us, say, based in District 10, you have an emergency. So that meant we would run over to the ambulance across campus and get there, and then we'd sign on and they'd tell you what it was. It was great.
Great job.
Well, a lot of people that do it now are, actually, my friend Karen Jones, well, there is a lot of that. Before it was just. Really? My daughter went there. She graduated in 2019. Yeah. Came on and she was like, but Mike, the other kids, it's cool. It's fun. We had fun. That was, busy on the ambulance. We had, it's like the best 4 years of my life. And when you're done with bed, it's going on. There's always, that and then always, things. And I went to college. And then I graduated that summer. I was an RA, so I stayed on campus, did fire messengers. And then the summer was so the now retired fire chief in Burlington, Vermont, the retired police, he went to the magnet was in the state police. They weren't then. This nurse in the all rented house. It's called Colchester. Right out on Mel's Head. So we were volunteers for that, and he was nursing home jobs. And they went on. Seth last week came freshman. Mark is in the Middle State Police. He's retired. Sarah's in Iowa. 1986. There until we needed to down in those day, for people practice and work for the center and crews and it was up. Yeah, but I think it's a break for 2 months. What else that's no, it's okay. I'm talking about college fires. Nothing to shake up. Yep. Good. No, it's right up to starting business. We're not even. That one. That's okay. You okay?
Oh, I'm fine. Is everything done?
No.
Oh, okay. I witnessed an automobile accident. I was standing on top of I had gotten out of Judiciary and I was walking out and there was a woman there who wanted to talk to me about something. And so I stood there for a few minutes and I saw someone come up we're gonna go ahead and open the public hearing on House Bill 1037 and recognize the prime sponsor, Representative Horrigan.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I continue to be Representative Timothy Horrigan, and last I checked, I still represented Trafford County District 6, the towns of Durham and Madbury. And this is a very simple bill, which it actually just takes out the phrase "for informational purposes" from some language about what's the governor's duty in reporting expenditures related to states of emergency. And the thinking behind this is that the phrase "for informational purposes" only could have been used as a reason for not reporting certain expenditures if some future governor felt that certain expenditures didn't need to be reported for informational purposes. So it didn't serve any informational purpose. So I just wanted to make sure that the governor reports all the expenditures. And my original version bill also took out the last phrase to ensure transparency, but the committee decided to leave that in, and that's fine. There already are transparency government laws which require the governor and every other state official to report basically all expenditures. So that's it's a pretty simple bill that makes just a semantic change. It sailed through the body that I belong to pretty much unanimously. So I would hope the same thing happens on your side of the walls. And not sure what else there is to say about it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony, Representative. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Representative.
Thank you, and I'll go back to House
And
Judiciary.
I will see you at 10 o'clock.
Oh, I hope so. Thanks.
Okay, are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 1037? Representative, you look, what do you, do you want to testify? Oh, I didn't know if you wanted to testify on this bill, or? Okay, all right, I just want to check and make sure. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and close the public hearing on House Bill 1037. Oh, no. The committee will be in recess until 9:45. Yeah, I mean, I thought we would have a lot more testimony. Thank you, Chantal. The committee will come out of recess. We're going to go ahead and open the public hearing on House Bill 1045 and recognize the prime sponsor, Representative Pearson. Good morning, Representative.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mark Pearson. I'm chairman of the House Health and Human Services and Elderly Affairs Committee, and also the chairman of the Joint Legislative DHHS Oversight Committee. And as such, I'm in regular contact with DHHS Commissioner Lori Shibonet. There is presently an Ethics Advisory Committee for the Commissioner, but she does not make use of it, she tells me, because several of the members, although we are sure personally they're quite ethical, are not trained in ethics. So the advice that they would give to her would be based on economics or politics or personal feelings, and she already has that. And so I've spoken with her about her desire to have a reconstituted Ethics Advisory Committee. Then I spoke with several professional organizations in the state in the fields of law, education, psychology, and two different groups of medicine, one physicians, the other nurses. Each organization, I learned, has its own ethics subcommittee. And in each phone call, I was told they would doubtless have a member eager to serve on the reconstituted committee. Before the amendment, now the bill was submitted to OLS, the commissioner and I went over it for detail, and she enthusiastically approved of the contents of what you have before you. This will give her an opportunity, when needed, to have an ethics advisory committee that is composed of people trained in the subject of ethics. And that is my testimony.
Thank you very much for your testimony this morning, Representative. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none.
I'm all prepared, and you've waved me off. Thank you.
We don't have any questions.
Okay.
I think you did a great job of telling us why the bill is needed and what the bill actually does, so we're good.
Thank you so much, Madam
Thank you.
Committee.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 1045? Okay, seeing none, close the public hearing. Okay, and then I'm gonna go across the street, and hopefully there won't be another accident, and Kevin's gonna be taking over, okay, because Representative Reagan is over in the House with a House bill, and I'm going over to the House for a House bill at 10 o'clock. And then, oh, I know you guys well. I know you well. And then we can hopefully we can get most of everything we have exec, and there might be one or two when we're not meeting next week. No, I'm not gonna have us meet because I've got my appointment 4 months waiting for it. So I'm going. Most of the work here is done. Whatever we have left, we can take care of, I think, on the 20th. And we're well before the cutoff date. So.
And we had regular people that got kind of paired with a volunteer, and prescription drugs and all kinds of things, and just 100% powered by volunteers. And then Bedford Community Food Pantry, they didn't want people dropping food there because of the pandemic. They didn't want people picking it up inside. They had people drive by and get the order. So I turned my house into Bedford Community Pantry, and people dropped off stuff, and I ended up delivering 3,000 pounds of food to the pantry. But I'd have volunteers come, and we would have to sort it because some people get expired, this. So we would sort it, and then we would deliver it there. I also got things like that the caregivers needed, or Meals on Wheels, like, believe it or not, they needed adult diapers. So like I was collecting and going here and going there. It kept me very busy during the whole time, and then it just done more than a nonprofit in 4 years. I said, because we're not waiting for grants, we're not being paid, it's just all volunteers. And so I just kept so busy. Then I got a phone call. Yeah, I'm gonna write a book someday about the whole thing, but then I got a phone call from Elliott Hospital, the social workers.
Oh, I just got an email from you. Not from the social workers, from the trauma. Yeah.
So they said, will Bedford Cares do Manchester? And I said, well, my volunteers committed to help their community where they live. I said, and I said,
So much. Geographically.
so they had certain people. So I did it for these people in Manchester. Yeah, that Carpenter Hotel, that place. So I was ending up shopping for those people. But no offense to the mayor's office, but I called them and I said, left a voice message that, look, I can teach somebody over there how to do this. So you have, they never called me back. And the message was, due to the emergency operation, due to the pandemic, we are at the emergency operations center. And I said to myself, yeah, you're so buzzed. That's what I told them.
Yeah, she was down there. She was. My wife was there. She was there until she left.
But they didn't call me back. So anyway, now I was shopping for those people in that building because the social workers didn't have anybody. Then they would call me and say, we need people. Can you take people to the bank and all? I'm like, no. I said, I don't have insurance. Like, I'm not a business. I cannot be driving people. Like, that's not happening.
Yeah.
And so then 3 weeks ago, I guess it's been 3 weeks now, yeah, I decided to turn it into Bedford Cares for the people of the Ukraine.
Oh, nice.
So now, my garage,
It's still full.
it's got,
You have to rent out a storage unit.
well, it's been taken out 3 times, but medical supplies,
Yeah.
tents, sleeping bags, blankets, non-perishable foods.
So do you have a contact? You're shipping?
Yes,
Wow.
yes. So they're taking the essential items that they need, tourniquets, gauze, medical supplies, and it's flown on the Polish Airlines to Warsaw. And then from there, the Catholic University is dispersing it. The non-essential items, like the clothing and things that they're gonna need that can't take space, is picked up from my house and driven to New Jersey and put on a ship.
Wow.
This whole thing just sort of like flew into place.
Yeah.
So volunteers come every Saturday and we go through everything in the garage. We have to box it, label it, and tape it.
Wow.
And my husband does it. As people drop stuff at my house while I'm here, he starts boxing it.
So this is going to be full time. This is incredible.
Well, yeah, but I kept it alive after the pandemic, sort of, because I said, let's just keep it for any emergency. Suppose somebody in town has an operation and they can't grocery shop and they don't have to, let's just keep it open. It doesn't cost anything to keep it open, right? And it really was a Facebook page, but it expanded so much, turned it into a website now.
Yeah.
So
So
and I
you
don't.
man the website and everything too? If something comes up, you just kind of activate it, but just kind of get the update of
I have, I'm not very technical, so I have a friend that does that for me. She created the website, and I answer the people, but or I'll say to her, put an email blast out, let people know what's happening. Pictures, we take pictures. The kids that come to my house that have made cards for the Ukraine, and you can see there's a button at the top of that. You can see all the stuff that Bedford Cares has done, and I mean, it got right down to the nitty-gritty of people who gave expired food that we couldn't use. There's some pig in Bedford that was able to use the food.
Oh, really?
There's a Arnold.
I do love that. That's great.
An Arnold the pig or whatever. But I like doing. I like being helpful.
Yeah.
And I never put politics on that thing. No, but even when I ran for Senate.
Just a little.
Oh, yeah,
And I'm getting the full.
no, I don't want you to get sick. You can shut it. I'm not helping, Mark.
I think you just pull it down a little. I'll get it.
No, I was gonna, I didn't want to.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Yeah, no, we don't want you to get sick.
No, I it felt really nice, but I was actually starting to get cold.
No, I don't want you to get cold. But I didn't eat when I ran for Senate. I didn't like anything there. I keep it for the community,
Right.
which is everybody. So I keep it very
Yeah.
like.
We've probably got your name up there. I think.
Yeah, but
Not through that, but
Yeah.
just that they know it when they see
Yeah,
it.
but
signs
maybe
or-
because I used to just like put Denise in a heart. That was like my signature for
Yeah.
Bedford Cares. I didn't elaborate, you know?
Oh.
So some people probably don't even know, but that's fine. But I like it because it makes me feel useful when there's a crisis.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, when my wife was had colon cancer, and she had surgery, and she was, I mean, the kids were young, and it was incredible. All the friends and people, acquaintances, they were dropping off food, and at one point we said, "Hey, I want to come over. We have so much food." And then one of her friends put a list out on Facebook, and then
Like a meal train.
like and it was like daily or something, and it was just incredible. It was like 2-3 weeks worth. It was,
Well, the
yeah.
best part about all of it is that with all the divisiveness that has become in the recent years, it's, for me, it's beyond like, it's helping the community really come together.
Yeah.
You know, the Bedford School District superintendent wanted to partner with Bedford Cares.
Oh.
They put boxes at all 6 schools.
Yeah.
The ice cream shop,
What a
Inside Scoop.
volunteering effort for the kids too. You know?
Oh yeah, he says your idea is so good and they've been wanting to do something, we didn't know what to do, this is great. And then we have Inside Scoop is an ice cream shop
Yeah.
there. She wanted to do, take $1 from every cone on March 31st and give the money to Bedford Cares. And I told her, I can't take money because I'm not.
Set up the file,
Right.
see, and then
So they
get into it.
sold the cones. They did over $800, and they bought all medical supplies to have Bedford Cares ship out. Yeah, yeah. So my point is like it made the community get a little bit more, you know.
People want to help. They
Right.
really do want to involve.
There's more good than evil. It's just
It
really
really is. It's just we all sometimes
I know.
get the extremes take over. It's not the way it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Of anything.
Yeah. Extreme hot, extreme cold. Anything.
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't. That's my little like pet thing story. But
Yeah.
Sue knew about it. I told her before.
Really great website.
Yeah. I'll just keep it going.
Yeah. It's always going to be an emergency.
Right. It's always going to be something or somebody needs something.
Just not over 90 days.
You have a good sense of humor.
I was telling him, he had said, they said,
Yeah.
and I can't hear, but even when they're saying, they're like, these low tones, and then his giggles.
Well, he's always cracking up. I feel like he is.
He has a
serious.
dry sense.
It's funny. Yeah.
He
He does.
He does. Dry.
He's very curly.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
It really bothered me. They called me up saying, it really bothered me. Yeah, so.
You know, we all have to go out after.
After a session.
Yeah, we
that's-
should.
I finally went, I'm like, let's see what this is all
At
about.
the tea garden? What kind of food do they? Is it?
Chinese. Yeah.
Oh, I love Chinese.
Yeah, that's good. Good food.
So they're all on first one. They're all on St. Patrick's Day.
Chinese on St.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Hello again. My name is Representative Len Turcott. I represent Stratford District 4, which is the town of Barrington. I serve on the Labor Committee, the Finance Committee, Special Committee on Redistricting, and I'm a senior advisor in the House Majority Office. Today I'm here to introduce House Bill 1337 on behalf of myself, the prime sponsor, and the co-sponsors who are also members of the House Majority Leadership Team. What this legislation will do will index the unemployment compensation by tying it to the unemployment duration, by tying the unemployment duration to the unemployment rate. So in general, what this indexing bill would do, excuse me, is it's a rational and common sense tool that would do just a couple things. One, it'll strengthen eventually the state's trust fund. It'll reduce the unemployment insurance taxes that businesses pay, allowing for possibly better pay for their employees or the expansion of their businesses. It'll incentivize the work ethic. And of interesting note, I'm not sure if you all received the example I sent from Florida, but it has been successfully implemented in 10 other states so far. Universally positive results, some exceptional. Florida was the exceptional case. In general, how this will work, it indexes the length of employment benefits to the latest state unemployment rate. Basically, when the unemployment rate is high, the benefits last longer. When the unemployment rate is low, like today, the benefits are shorter. Specifically, what it would do is it would take the maximum length of unemployment would remain at its current level of 26 weeks when the employment rate is 8% or higher. It would reduce down by 0.5% when the unemployment rate goes down to a minimum of 3%, where the maximum unemployment benefit would be 16 weeks. So it's basically a straight line reduction from 26 down to 16, from 8% down to 3%. Today's unemployment rate, as we all know, in New Hampshire is under 3%, so the maximum benefit would be 16 weeks. Now, originally, when we put the bill forward, I had set the maximum amount at 20 weeks and a minimum at 12. And that was, later I amended that based on testimony by individuals, some business groups, and with some data that Deputy Commissioner Lavers provided to me. From the original bill to the amendment, also a couple other things that were changed. In exceptional times, we have seen large swings on the unemployment rate over a very short period of time. The two examples, the financial crisis of 2008, and most recently, of course, the COVID crisis, where unemployment rates skyrocketed. In both of those cases, the Fed stepped in and extended unemployment rates. Deputy Commissioner Lavers also mentioned that he believes they would do that again. However, I wanted to ensure that there were other provisions, so I added a note about RSA 445, which would extend to the governor the ability to alter this in the case of a state of emergency, such as we just experienced. Another change that we made, originally we were going to benchmark the unemployment rate based on the third quarter. We had one business group who represents seasonal workers, basically. He was concerned about a few things, but in order to capture the slightly higher unemployment rates that occur because of seasonal workers, landscapers, people who work outdoor, pavers, and that kind of thing, changed the benchmark quarter to the fourth quarter of the year. And the last change we made was originally it was a effective date 60 days after passage. We pushed that to 120 days. That would be to give the department and any potential that we're going to be employed a little bit more time to adjust to the changes. We know for a fact that when individuals are unemployed, they are more likely to stay on the long-term dependency the longer they remain on it, and then it becomes harder to find work for themselves. And studies have shown that receiving these benefits for an extended amount of time, it it decreases the likelihood of them actually being reemployed. And we are seeing this now, as we know, with the shortage of workers in New Hampshire and throughout the country, that many workers are still sitting on the sidelines. One of the best examples, I think, of the reason for shortening the benefit, especially in times of very low employment, was, again, this COVID situation last spring we saw when the government was still adding $300 a week to unemployment benefits. There came a time when the governor was given the opportunity to end that, and he chose to continue it. He reversed that decision very quickly after that, within a couple of weeks, because he had a lot of input from business groups that were saying, you know, we shouldn't be taking this governmental extra $300 a week. We need to get our employees back. So no, and he did. He reversed that in order to get more of our people back to work. At one time, just for the at one time during last year, during the COVID crisis, at one point you could remain out of work and collect $3,600 a month. So in closing, what I will say is New Hampshire right now, as we know, is experiencing the work shortage, and we need more workers, not extended welfare and unemployment enrollment. Indexing has proven throughout the country to be a rational, responsible, and very common sense way to improve our unemployment insurance policies. New Hampshire has a very good one now, but this can only make it better. There are no downsides financially to this. It can only make it better. Again, longer term payments when unemployment rates are high, shorter term when the unemployment rate is low. It'll save the businesses and reduce their unemployment insurance taxes, and that can be used to benefit employees and expand their businesses. And most of all, it incentivizes our workforce to return to work as quickly as possible. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Senator Prentice.
Thank you. Good to see you again, sir.
Good to see you.
Two questions. You referenced 14 states already do this?
I think it's 10 or 11 right now. We would be either the 11th or 12th.
You know, and you mentioned Florida, do you have a reference for the other states? You don't have to list them all.
I can definitely get that to you. Yeah, I have that.
And I may have missed, so second question, and I may have missed this, so I apologize. Is there a direct, I heard in your testimony that if we change it, you know, if we do this indexing, that it will bring more people back when business needs,
Thank you.
needs workers. But is there evidence that shows that that's the case here? I'm just looking for,
I'm not saying it will guarantee somebody who's decided to leave the workforce will come back. What I'm saying is people who are on benefits will come back. I have lots of data. I'd be happy to get it to you that shows as you lower the length of time somebody's on unemployment, the quicker they come back to work. I had one set of data that Deputy Commissioner Lavers pulled for me, which was to me, very revealing and telling. Now, the data's from 2018 and 2019 because he didn't want to use anything post, COVID and on because it kind of skewed things so much. But in general, he had buckets of unemployment in weeks, and from the 15 and 19 bucket down, and not less than that, a full 75% of our workforce goes back to work within that time frame, which is good. And then what happens from the 19 to 25, there's just a trickle of percentage that are there, a couple, 2%, 2%, 3%. But what's interesting is at 26%, that number jumps up to 16%. So what that tells me is there's a large group, and I actually spoke to a fellow legislator the other day about unemployment and what he did, and he, because he had a second income with his wife, he stayed on that unemployment insurance for the full amount rather than go back to work because it was available. And I believe if the 16% that stays on for the 26 full weeks, there's a segment of that 16%, probably the majority of that are staying there because it's there. The rest of these individuals who go back to work very quickly, and again, I pegged the numbers in this bill to pretty much to the sheet. Those people go back because they probably need the money, and New Hampshire's unemployment benefits aren't so high that a lot of people could afford to stay out. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Did I? Okay. You're welcome.
More questions? Thank you. I have Representative Erica Layer. Does it say wishing to speak, or? That's it, okay. Richard Lavers? Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Richard Lavers, Deputy Commissioner, New Hampshire Department of Employment Security. I provided some slides that I was going to review with folks, and I had some initial comments, and then we can go over those slides, and then obviously here for any questions that the members of the committee may have. For the record, the department is in opposition to the bill as amended. We did work quite closely with Representative Turcotte with the bill as originally filed, exchanged a lot of information, and worked quite closely with him. However, we feel that based on the testimony we'll provide today and the experience of the unemployment program over these last few years, where nearly a quarter of the state's labor force, about 175,000 people, relied upon that program, that we feel this is unnecessary and unwise policy at this time. So despite the unprecedented reliance on the unemployment program during the pandemic, New Hampshire is back to historically low levels of unemployment. The number of people filing for benefits right now has not been this low in going back 30 years. And the number of filers on a weekly basis right now is actually over 40% lower than where we were for the same week in 2019 prior to the pandemic. On a weekly basis right now, we have between 2,000 to 2,500 individuals that are filing weekly claims for their unemployment benefit. And when we look at our neighboring states, when we look at Maine and we look at Vermont, you can see that New Hampshire is quite different than what other states are experiencing. The state of Maine right now has over 7,000 people filing for benefits each week. The state of Vermont has over 3,500 individuals filing for benefits each week. New Hampshire had 2,200 last week. So Vermont, significant increase over New Hampshire despite having half the population. So things are quite different in New Hampshire. Our private sector labor force is back to over 99% of what it was prior to the pandemic. We are short about 5,600 private sector jobs right now when we compare where we currently are for private sector employment to the pre-pandemic. Our forecasts right now show us as reaching back to that pre-pandemic level, or closing that delta of that 5,600 jobs later on this year. Obviously, that forecast is somewhat dependent upon international events and how they impact our local and regional and national economy, but we are forecasting to achieve that, reaching back to that pre-pandemic point. Second half of 2022 most likely could happen prior to that. And looking at our private sector labor force in terms of growth, last year we grew by over 4%, and you'll see in the slides I'll go over in a second. Nationally, the national labor force grew by just 3%. So New Hampshire's labor force has been growing faster. People have been returning to work faster in New Hampshire than the region and the country as a whole. Looking at the handout I just provided, I'll go over these slides quickly for the members. The first slide just highlights the point that I just discussed, and you can see here a comparison of how many individuals relied upon the unemployment program during the pandemic. Close to 176,000 people, about 25% of our entire labor force. You compare that to how many individuals relied upon the unemployment program in 2019, that was 14,000. And then you compare that to the Great Recession, when we had just under 100,000 people during the 2 peak years of that downturn. So quite a different experience in the pandemic compared to prior, where we were prior to the pandemic, and obviously back in the last economic downturn. At their peak, those weekly claims reached almost 117,000 individuals. And you can see on the second slide how that number has come down and where we are currently at just over 2,200 individuals filing each week. Well, someone could look at that and suggest that, well, that's probably true everywhere. Other states are seeing that same type of recovery. That is not true for other states. On the next slide, you can see how New Hampshire compares to New England and the country as a whole when we look at how quickly claims increased and how quickly claims have come down. New Hampshire right now is at about 2.5% of its peak week in terms of the number of people filing right now compared to our peak week back in May of 2020. When you look at other New England states are at about 11% of their peak week, and the country as a whole is about 8% of their peak week. And interestingly enough, when you look at that chart, New Hampshire in the red line, you can see that widening gap with New Hampshire's number of people filing being lower when New Hampshire took an early exit from the federal CARES Act programs that had provided those bonuses and those extensions that Representative Turcott was referencing. So when New Hampshire got out early last year in June, compared to other states in the region that continued in those programs until September of 21, you can see how that gap widened with New Hampshire having a more significant reduction in people filing for claims and returning to work compared to the region and the rest of the country. A few additional slides. You'll see the statistic that I had just discussed with regard to New Hampshire's private sector labor force growth in 2021 compared to the country as a whole. New Hampshire was at 4.3% growth when those numbers were benchmarked, and the country as a whole was just over 3%. So New Hampshire recovering faster than the country. Next slide, you can see how New Hampshire compared to other states. Our labor force stands at about 1.1% off from where we were pre-pandemic. The only other state in the region that is close to New Hampshire is Maine. That's off by just a little under 1% in terms of private sector jobs. However, they do have a lot higher number of individuals currently filing for benefits, as we had discussed before. The impact of all of this on employer tax rates. In the next slide, you can see that on the right-hand side of this slide, in the red line, you can see that New Hampshire's peak tax rate for employers during the pandemic was 2.33%. So an employer pays at that rate that is based on their experience. They pay that of the first $14,000 in annual earnings to each employee. When you compare that to New Hampshire's experience back in the Great Recession, not only was the peak much higher, it was stubbornly stagnant at that high level for a much longer period of time. Whereas you can see the rate coming down quickly here in New Hampshire in those quarters since the pandemic peak, with the third quarter of 21, that rate being down below 1.7%. One other slide I'll highlight here is the next one, and I'll allow members to look at the other slides that provide some interesting information, not necessarily information I need to go over with you today. But the trust fund forecast, so the trust fund from which we pay out benefits that is funded by employers here in the state. Our trust fund has recovered quite impressively, where we are forecasting right now that employers will start to see those tax rate reductions return either at the very end of this current year, so either the fourth quarter of 2022 or in the first quarter of 2023. That first quarter tends to be an employer's most expensive quarter for unemployment compensation taxes. So hitting in either of those quarters would the timing would be very opportune for employers in bringing their rates down further. And you can then see the quarter ending balances on that chart for the continued growth of the fund out through the end of our forecast period of 2024. And again, there is some additional information in slides that I've provided just on who's coming back to the labor force, who isn't, what age groups, and then how we stack up with other states in terms of domestic migration into the state, as New Hampshire's done quite well over the pandemic with people moving into the state, not only with just the raw numbers of people moving in, but compared to other states in the region, the folks that are moving into New Hampshire tend to be much younger compared to the folks that are moving into Maine and Vermont, so a much younger demographic. Getting back to the indexing bill before you, prior to the pandemic, New Hampshire had an average duration of less than 13 weeks of individuals collecting benefits, despite there being 26 weeks available, and about 17% of claim filers exhausted their benefits. So 17% utilized all 26 weeks. And I'll talk a little bit more about why we see some of those numbers that Representative Turcotte had described to you. We're seeing that bump up with individuals filing for that at that 26-week mark. Currently, average duration is less than 15 weeks. Prior to the pandemic, New Hampshire had the second lowest UI tax burden in the country at 0.14% of total wages paid. Only Florida was lower. Florida had 0.12% of total wages paid. So virtually a dead heat despite 26 weeks being available in New Hampshire. Other New England states weren't anywhere close to New Hampshire prior to the pandemic. And looking at the number of weeks available is important here as we look at the state's ability to respond to the pandemic in the way that we did. We bring ourselves back to March of 2020. We had tens of thousands of people concerned about losing their jobs at the start of the pandemic, not knowing what was to come next. New Hampshire was able to expand eligibility for unemployment ahead of other states in the region, ahead of the federal government. We didn't know what the federal government was going to do. This was prior to the CARES Act. We didn't know what they were going to do or when they were going to do it. New Hampshire was able to expand eligibility for individuals finding themselves unemployed because of the pandemic. And we were able to do that before everyone else because of two things. One, we had a solvent trust fund. We had $300 million in our employer-paid trust fund. But we also had 26 weeks of benefits available. So we had our trust fund was solvent, and we hadn't unnecessarily undersized our number of weeks available at that time, which was important for individuals going into that period, not knowing what was coming next, And we weren't making ourselves dependent upon the federal government taking action at that time because we didn't know what they were going to do and we didn't know when they were going to do it. So historically, New Hampshire has a very low average duration of individuals filing for benefits. As Representative Turcott had indicated, we have close to 50% of our claim filers, back when we look at 2018, 2019, 50% of claim filers file for less than 10 weeks, despite 26 being available. When we look at the number of individuals that file for more than 16 weeks, which would be the cap that the bill as amended would put on the program, you have about 7,000 people during 2018, 2019 that filed for more than 16 weeks. And about 2,000 of those individuals that filed for more than 16 weeks had part-time employment. So New Hampshire, like many states, allows an individual, once they have a qualifying separation from employment, meaning they find themselves unemployed through no fault of their own, they are able to obtain new part-time employment or keep pre-existing part-time employment. It reinforces that attachment to the labor market, and you're able to have that part-time employment and those part-time earnings while you collect benefits. Now you need to report those hours. You need to report those earnings to us each week, and those earnings are going to reduce your weekly benefit amount. So the reason why those individuals file for longer than 16 weeks is because their weekly benefit amount is reduced. Thus, their maximum available benefits get stretched over a longer period of time. The concern with this legislation and the impact that it could have on those individuals is that if there's a hard cap of 16 weeks being available, there's absolutely zero incentive for those individuals to obtain part-time employment, because why else are you going to reduce your weekly benefit when you only have 16 weeks available to you? So again, that's a little over 2,000 individuals that have part-time employment while they're collecting unemployment benefits. Most of those individuals, you think about where our part-time employment largely lies, is in hospitality and retail. So the concern would be that individuals currently filing, obtaining their partial unemployment benefit while they're working would have no incentive to do so going forward. So that's a concern and the impact that could have on those individuals' desire to work while collecting. So New Hampshire hasn't historically had a problem with duration of unemployment. We have one of the lowest average weekly benefit amounts in the country, lowest in the region for certain. That tends to be the control on how long individuals file for unemployment. People certainly want to get back to work. We're back at over 99% of our labor force being our pre-pandemic labor force being back working. Our unemployment claims have fallen faster than other states in the region and the country as a whole. Our individuals are going back to work faster now, just like they did prior to the pandemic. And our tax burden on our employers has historically been one of the lowest in the country. And you can see with the information I provided on how quickly tax rates are falling again for our employers. So right now, with any concern, and there are concerns across all sectors that employers have with not having enough workers to meet their demand, that was a concern employers had prior to the pandemic as well. But it's not a problem caused by the unemployment program. I just want to be clear with that. It is an after effect of the pandemic. And we continue to see certain demographic groups that are slow to return to work right now. We can speculate as to reasons why our 60 to 64-year-olds have had a 6% drop off in labor force participation rate. I think that one is probably an easier group to theorize as to why that is occurring, and that is directly related to the pandemic, along with people realizing that my retirement accounts, my value of my home have both gone up dramatically. Maybe I'll retire 2, 3, 4 years earlier than I was originally planning. The current inflation numbers might have an impact on that, and those individuals might second guess that decision and might return to the labor force. But we've seen a large drop off in 60 to 64-year-olds. We've seen a large drop off in 25 to 29-year-olds as well. Much different reasons. Our 25 to 29-year-olds are going to have to come back. What we're seeing and what we think the reasons are for those individuals are that there were a lot of assistance provided, both state and federal, mostly federal, during the pandemic, and there was a lot of forgiveness of obligations on the part of individuals in that age group and other support programs. So those individuals will come back. That is having a significant impact on our labor force right now, with that being about a 5% drop off in labor force participation. But again, these are pandemic caused problems and the after effects of the pandemic. These are not labor force constraints caused by the unemployment program. So in closing, I would just caution the committee about making unnecessary changes to a program that served the state very well during the pandemic. 175,000 individuals depended upon this program. So I would be concerned if we were going to now undersize the program and cut the number of weeks by 40%, making the state dependent upon the federal government taking action at the beginning of the next economic downturn. If that were the case 2 years ago, I don't know what our response would have been, because again, we were able to act faster than our neighboring states and the country as a whole because we had the confidence of a solvent trust fund and a unemployment program that wasn't undersized. So with that being said, I'll close my comments. I'll take any questions from members of the committee.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Labors. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. These numbers during the reopening task force we got is always interesting to see them all. I think the 60 to 64-year-olds and the 25 to 29-year-olds probably having a great time right now, and hopefully they do get back to work. But do you have any information or breakdown of those numbers, men and women? Is that, can we get that? Just be curious to see what that.
Yeah. So the 60 to 64-year-olds, there's really no gender pattern there. It's equal between men and women in terms of the drop-off in labor force participation. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, your 25 to 29-year-olds are largely men. It's largely men in that age group that have not come back to work. We did see interestingly, the 35 to 39-year-old age group, which looking back at that chart, has rebounded better than the 25 to 29-year-old age group. That was the 35 to 39-year-olds were largely women, and we speculate that that was likely caused by a lack of childcare options for that group. But they are rebounding much better than the 25 to 29-year-old group, which, like I said, is mostly men.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Mr.
Thank you.
Livers. Okay, the chair will call Henry Veilleux. Good morning, Mr. Veilleux.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, I think this is my first time in several years testifying before the Senate ED&A committee. So happy to be here this morning. I'm here this morning on behalf of the New Hampshire Lodging and Restaurant Association, which supports the concept of the bill. The idea that the lower the rate, the shorter time see the concern you raised with regards to some partial that I guess we wouldn't want back there. But we're here to support the concept. And if the committee was to move forward with something like this, certainly we'd like to help participate in putting something like this together.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. The chair will call Roy Schreider. Is that correct? Good morning.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Roy Schreider.
Turn on your microphone.
Thank you, sir. There you
Okay.
go.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Roy Schweiker from Concord, and I don't have a particular opinion on this bill directly, but I have some issues. One thing is, it says here that the unemployment rate is based on the fourth quarter. I mean, one might think that you might base it on the most recent quarter, because if the unemployment rate is going up or down, whether someone can find a job, it isn't based on last year, it's based on now. So that seemed kind of strange. And in the chart that was provided here, they used an age breakdown from 60 to 64, and particularly in terms of workers, I mean, that may be true, different for healthcare, for instance, but for workers, you become eligible for Social Security at age 62, so it might be interesting in future ones of these charts to have 62 as a break point. How many more people drop out of the workforce when they turn 62 as compared to before that? But the other thing I have to say, and I said some of this at the House hearing and nothing has changed, is I retired from the state 9 years ago. Since then, I've been some of the time volunteering for a group that helps the unemployed. So I've been, through this process. And my feeling is that, yes, this will save the state money. It would probably save the state even more money if you eliminate the unemployment fund at all. But I'm not really sure this is going to serve the purpose it wants to. And part of the problem is that it's very hard to get help right now from the Department of Unemployment Security if you want a job. And for instance, Monday I looked on the website and I discovered the Concord office, according to the website, was open from 8 to 4:30. Well, I went over there at 11:45 and the door was locked, there was no sign. And fortunately, an employee wandering by said, "Oh no, it's only open from 12 to 4. But there was no sign on the door. The website still gives the 8 to 4:30. I don't know how much it would cost the Department of Employment Security to fix their website, according to what their actual hours are, to put a sign on the door. But I mentioned this in the House hearing, which was, a month or two ago, and they haven't changed since then. So apparently it's more than they can afford to do that. And the other thing is, once you get in there, you're limited to half an hour time limit on the computer. And I don't know, probably most of you use computers and check your email and stuff, but if you're looking through job emails, how long is half an hour going to last you? And if you try to fill out an application online, which of course nearly everybody wants, you'll be lucky to do that in half an hour. It may take an hour just to do the application, and that's if you walk in knowing what you want to do. So, that's kind of a problem too. You're not really given enough time to accomplish anything once you're there. And their computer resources, and once again, I spoke to the commissioner about this a couple of years ago, and nothing has changed. I mean, I suggested to one person, why don't you buy yourself a laptop for $129, type up the stuff at home where you don't have internet service, you don't have a printer, and then go into the office and use it. Well, the answer is, you cannot put a thumb drive in their computers. You can't, save a bunch of letters and email them off or type them off. And this is a security issue. But I mean, other places seem to allow you to put in thumb drives. There must be some security solution to this, but they don't do that. Another thing is, let's say you want to search for a job. Now, I went to the office on Monday and I couldn't do it because it was closed. But at one time, for instance, the blocking on the site at the New Hampshire Works office was the same as it is for state employees. So let's say you wanted to search for a job on Craigslist. Well, you can't do that because Craigslist is blocked for state employees. Once again, there's jobs on Facebook. Well, you can't use Facebook from there. Once again, I didn't verify this on Monday because I couldn't get in, but you can check on that. Let's say you're a machinist and you think maybe you want it for Storm Ruger, so you try to go to their website, oh no, that's guns. State employees aren't allowed to access that either. So it's really very hard with limited hours and limited time once you're there to get help finding a job. So if the real problem that the state is suffering is we want these people back to work, why don't we empower the Department of Employment Security to be open all day like they're supposed to be, to allow people to use computers for reasonable stuff, and to give people that have trouble with computers help with them. And right now, we're flush with money. It would seem like investing a little bit of money in helping people that have trouble getting jobs to get a job now, when you know they won't have time to do that in the next recession. This is the time to help people find jobs. And I don't know why, the Business and Industry Association and the Restaurant Association, whatever, aren't on the case. Why aren't you, helping these people to fill out an application? I mean, once again, it's kind of strange, but there's still a legacy from COVID. A lot of places now, they used to walk in and fill out an application. You're supposed to do it online. What if you don't have a computer? And you can't go to the unemployment office because it's only open a few hours and you don't have time to do it. So we need to, get some help for these people. And one last thing I'll say about this business of, how long it takes someone to stay on unemployment. There's a person I know who was a legal secretary. And they spent a long time searching for a job as a legal secretary. And it wasn't for, I don't know, a year, 2 years, they finally gave up and tried working as a grocery clerk, which at 58 years old was too strenuous for them. When the point is, you say, well, here's an example of, they should have done that sooner. But it turns out this person was not collecting unemployment. They'd left their previous job voluntarily, so they were ineligible. So they didn't not take that grocery clerk job because they were getting rich off unemployment. They didn't take it because they wanted to devote their energy to finding a real job that paid money, that was something they could do, instead of a job that was too strenuous for them. So, once again, if you could help match up people with the jobs that they're good at and provide, should we say, a higher level of service, instead of trying to get everyone to take a menial job after 10 weeks or 16 weeks or whatever the number is today, I really think that's what the state should be doing, is trying to help the workers instead of, just saying, oh, we can save money if we cut the time frame. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony this morning. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak to House Bill 1337? Sir, please come forward, identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, and I apologize. I think I came right in at 10, so I signed in, but I think the sheet's still over there.
Okay.
My name is Raymond Burke, and I'm an attorney with New Hampshire Legal Assistance. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. As you might know, New Hampshire Legal Assistance is a statewide nonprofit law firm that provides free civil legal services to Granite Staters with low incomes throughout the state. We represent clients in cases impacting their basic needs. And one area of practice that we've seen a significant increase in demand for during the pandemic is assistance with accessing unemployment benefits. I'm testifying here today to oppose this bill. We believe, for many of the reasons you heard from Deputy Commissioner Lavers, that this bill is a solution in search of a problem. And one thing I'd like to clarify for the record is, even though our unemployment program provides for up to 26 weeks of benefits, it is not true that someone could automatically receive 26 weeks of benefits if they want to. Some of the other requirements that are important to consider here is that a person who's eligible for unemployment benefits has to demonstrate that they're actively searching for work. If they're not actively searching for work, their benefits will be terminated. And in addition, they can't refuse an offer of suitable work. If they refuse suitable work, their benefits will also be terminated. Now, some of those rules were temporarily modified during the pandemic because of the situation we were in. So, for example, for a long time during the pandemic, the work search requirement was waived, but that's now back in effect. That went back into effect, I believe, around the end of May of 2021. But even during the pandemic, you couldn't refuse an offer of suitable work and still receive benefits unless you met certain requirements under one of the new federal pandemic programs. And as you know, and as you've heard, the federal pandemic programs ended last June. So if someone were to refuse an offer of suitable work today, they could not continue to receive benefits. So already built into the program are these eligibility requirements that I think are incentives, or they're not even incentives, they are requirements. You have to be trying to get back into the labor market, or you can't continue to receive unemployment benefits. And in general, there are two classes of workers who are more likely to be unemployed longer. Those who have work schedule limitations like childcare obligations that they're struggling with, and older workers. And I wanted to just provide a little bit more information. I think you heard some of the data already. But the national median length of unemployment for workers between 55 and 64 years of age is currently 46% longer than the median among all workers. And of course, Deputy Commissioner Laver spoke to some of the more New Hampshire specific data earlier. Older workers often face intentional or unintentional bias in hiring. They can be perceived as at the end of their career or less capable of adapting to new roles. And as New Hampshire legal assistants' unemployment practice has boomed during the pandemic, we've regularly met older clients who have had to access their retirement savings early, or as you heard a moment ago, they decided to take Social Security retirement benefits earlier than they had planned because of what happened to the pandemic, which ultimately leads to a longer-term reduction in Social Security benefits that they can access. And they did this during the pandemic to try to stay afloat because they felt they had no other option. And having to tap their retirement resources early tends to make individuals more likely to need to rely on state or municipal assistance later in life should they encounter a financial crisis. Excuse me. You also heard already that we have one of the lower weekly benefit amounts the lowest in the region and one of the lowest in the country. The maximum weekly benefit amount that someone could receive is currently $427 per week, and that's been the same since 2007. And not everyone receives $427, that's just the max. The average that we looked at during 2021 was about $293 per week, which equates to about a little over $1,200 per month in taxable income. The clients that we meet, from our perspective, this is not an amount that someone could sit back and live off of. It replaces only 30% of their average wages. Excuse me. And so, as Deputy Commissioner Laver said, we think this provides an incentive to return to the labor market because someone will struggle to meet their basic needs with such a low amount. And I think I do have some more information that I could provide in writing. Unfortunately, I didn't have that ready to go this morning, but we can send that later today. But I think I can close there, and happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak to House Bill 1337? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Just let me know when you're all set. Okay. We're going to go ahead and open the public hearing on House Bill 1344 and recognize the prime sponsor, Representative Bernardi.
Thank you, Chairman Carson and the committee. For the record, I'm J.D. Bernardi, representative for Rockingham 16, which is Southampton, East Kingston, and Kensington. I'm a member of the Science and Technology and Energy Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to introduce HB 1344. It's a very simple but important bill to add further protection to the citizens of New Hampshire in the purchase and sale of real property. Real estate purchase and sale agreements contain considerable fine print that include language that grants a certain amount of agency. This bill is focused on making sure that when a piece of property is purchased or sold, only the owner or a duly authorized agent with a power of attorney can sign for that property. That's it. The purchase and sale agreement agency is not a authorization to sign for the sale of real estate. This legislation was filed on behalf of a constituent in Kensington who is here today to explain the importance of adopting this bill. Mrs. Janan Archibald is here on your testimony list to speak to the rationale. I'm more than happy to take questions, but she's going to fill out the full rationale for the purpose of this bill.
Thank you very much for your testimony this morning, Representative. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Reagan?
So currently, if I list my house with a realtor, can I also designate them with a power of attorney?
Not by this. Well, you have to have a specific power of attorney dedicated for that purpose, not by the agency contract that you're doing.
But separately?
Separately, you may.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
I don't know what's wrong with today. The chair will call Representative Silber.
Thank you, Senator Carson. I'm a co-sponsor. I want to give you a lawyer's perspective. This is my 52nd year as a licensed lawyer, which is sort of scary. The issue arises in not so much in purchase and sale agreements, but in listing agreements, when you list your property for sale. Most listing agreements don't say anything about granting the agent the right to sign a sale contract. But some, because they vary across the board, different agency and different real estate brokerage companies have different forms. A lot of it is fine print. And this is basically designed as a consumer protection bill. It's bipartisan. A few listing agreements contain in the fine print an authorization for the broker or the agent to sign the sale contract if the offer in the sale contract meets the parameters set forth in the listing agreement. What this bill says is those things are null and void. If you want to grant someone the right to sign the purchase and sale agreement for you as the owner, you must have a separate specific power of attorney under the power of attorney law, which basically requires it to be notarized. The listing agreements don't have to be notarized. So this is dealing with a problem where some people who are ill-informed, and most people sign the listing agreement without even reading it. They don't consult a lawyer until after it's too late. So this is basically a consumer protection device. I've done real estate transactions for most of my career. Occasionally you'll see these things. One of the problems is that language in a listing agreement purporting to give the agent the power to sign a sale contract on behalf of the owner, even without this bill, and even under our power of attorney law, a buyer can rely on a legal concept called apparent authority. In other words, if they look at the listing agreement, they see, well, the agent has the authority to sign the sale contract. I've got a contract signed by the agent. They have apparent authority to act. And so if the seller now decides, well, no, the agent shouldn't have done that, breached some duty, I didn't like the contract as it was written, whatever, you're talking about basically an annuity for lawyers to fight it out and over, is this going to be an enforceable contract or not? So it's pretty simple. Everybody tells you their bill is simple. This is really simple. In the committee, the vote ought to pass was 18-1, and the House ought to pass was a voice vote. So I'm willing to answer any questions that you might have about how powers of attorney work and things of that sort, or anything about the bill. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Representative. Are there any questions from the committee? No? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The chair will call Janin Archibald.
Hi, Senator Carson. Thank you for hearing my testimony. My name is Janan Archibald. I'm the constituent that JD was referring to. And thank you for the opportunity to explain my perspective on this bill. So my name is Janan Archibald. I'm here representing myself. For 12 years prior to COVID, I owned a small business specializing in senior downsizing. I was also a licensed New Hampshire real estate agent. My job afforded me the opportunity to work with senior clientele as they move from their large homes into continuing care, retirement centers, or independent living facilities. During my 10 years as a downsizing professional, I became very involved in my clients' lives and bore witness to situations involving elder exploitation and abuse. Many people think of physical abuse when hearing the term elder abuse, but the U.S. Justice Department, along with the National Adult Protective Services Association, defines financial exploitation as a form of elder abuse, and specifically states that unauthorized sales, transfer, or changes to property titles, estate documents, or power of attorney forms is a form of financial abuse. I agree that elder financial abuse is a problem. I have seen it. The statistics suggest that this problem is here and is expected to get a lot worse. For the first time in history, the Census Bureau projects the population over the age of 65 by 2030 will be the largest demographic in the United States, well outnumbering children. That's 1 in every 5 U.S. residents will be at retirement age. For those who advocate for senior rights like myself, this is a scary and daunting statistic. While the system of elder care may be structured with the best of intentions, getting care and services as defined by law can require a high level of advocacy. If the Census Bureau is correct, the need for senior advocates is going to be greater than it's ever been, and I'm fearful there won't be enough of us advocate types to go around. In the absence of advocates, the big stride we can make as stewards of humanity is establishing sound legislation that promotes honesty, integrity, and transparency, which is why I am in support of HB 1344. Simply put, this bill does not allow anyone to sign a purchase and sale contract on behalf of another person without a power of attorney on file. I have moved hundreds of people in the state of New Hampshire, and I can tell you that the most valuable asset almost all of them owned was their homes. For most, this was their very last real estate transaction, and the proceeds from the sale were used for down payments to move into independent living facilities and were needed to maintain their financial independence. While reading up on the prevalence of elder financial abuse, I found an interesting statistic stating that almost 1 in 10 financial abuse victims will turn to Medicaid as a direct result of their monies being stolen from them. For good or for bad, the process of signing a purchase and sale is now handled electronically, and theoretically, a legally binding document can be signed in a couple minutes sitting in front of your home computer. While I cannot speak to the legality and available recourse to individuals who are victims of a fraudulent contract signing, I can say that I have witnessed the anguish and frustration that clients have had to endure in the aftermath of such an incident. Resolving conflicts like these can take months and years to go through the court system, and often at significant expense. Generally, time and money are not viewed as a commodity that can be thrown around within this population, and the will to fight injustices is just not as intense. That's why I ask you committee members to take this small step towards ensuring we have sound legislation on the books that protects the interests of our seniors and vulnerable population in the state of New Hampshire.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak to House Bill 1344? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Is today the 6th or the 7th? I'm sorry. I'm just trying to figure out, is it the 6th or the 7th? Okay, I just want to make sure. It's one of those days. It's crazy. Huh? Yeah, well, that's okay. This one's, we have 4 people who want to speak on this one. Okay. You have to what? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay, are you all set? Okay. We're going to go ahead and open the public hearing on House Bill 1375 and recognize Representative Roy.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here to introduce HB 1375. My name is Terry Roy. I'm the representative of Rockingham 32. This bill is being brought at the request of the Department of Veterans Services. It's a simple bill that would change the definition of veteran for the state benefit purposes to line up with the federal VA definition of a veteran so that the two matched. Right now, there's in New Hampshire, the definition of veteran is honorable discharge. The Department of Veteran Affairs, it can be a general under honorable conditions. I'll leave the exact nuances of that to the people who are going to testify after me who requested the bill. And with that, I would take any questions if you have.
Thank you very much, Representative. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to go to, we have Mr. Perry and Mr. Gaudreau, both from DMAS. DMAS. Would you like to
If
come
we
up
could come together,
together?
Madam Chair, that would be great.
terrific.
You know, to save some time.
Yep, and that, just please make sure before you speak, you identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Warren Perry. I'm the Deputy Adjutant General for the Department of Military Affairs and Veteran Services, DMAVs.
For the record, Madam Chair, my name is William Gaudreau, and I'm the Director for the New Hampshire Division of Veteran Services.
So thank you, and thanks to Representative Roy for introducing this bill and sponsoring it for us. What we found in the state statutes is there's a difference between eligibility for benefits, for state benefits, that veterans who are eligible for federal benefits don't get based on the characterization of their discharge. So what we'd like to do is correct that by just expanding the eligibility for state veteran benefits to include general discharges that are given under honorable conditions. I have a primer, and I sent it to the committee earlier about the types of discharges. If there are questions about those, we can certainly answer them. Within the VA system, members who receive general under honorable condition discharges are eligible to receive lots of different benefits from the VA, including health care, home loans, educational benefits, insurance benefits, disability compensation, and pension benefits. The federal law does establish a bar to certain benefits on other characterizations of discharges. Such discharges are bad conduct discharges or dishonorable discharges, which bar them. And this bill does not address those bad conduct discharges, only general discharges under honorable conditions. So we think that if you're eligible to receive federal benefits, you shouldn't be precluded from receiving state benefits. And those state benefits include some education benefits, some employment benefits, some tax credit or exemption benefits based on, we get queries from many Vietnam veterans, many combat veterans who served honorably in combat, served our nation in combat, but because of the characterization of their discharge, even though it is under honorable conditions, are not eligible for these benefits, and we think that's not right. So we'd ask you to favorably consider this. It will affect some number of towns in terms of tax credits. There will be an impact. There is a fiscal impact. We understand that, but the numbers are not really that high. We estimate in the state of New Hampshire about 75,000 veteran-led households. Of those 75,000 veteran-led households, about 47,000 of them are owned by veterans, not in a rental status, but they actually own the property. The best estimates we could come up with in terms of the number of general discharges that are in the state is somewhere between 6.5% and 10% of veterans receive a general discharge. So in real numbers, the total number of people that we could expand to eligibility for these benefits would be somewhere around 4,700, 4,750 at the high end, and about 3,000 on the low end based on those percentages. I don't have a good number of how many people own houses that have a general discharge. It may be less, it may be more, but the general numbers, that gives you the kind of ballpark. And county-wise, it would, across the counties, they're pretty evenly distributed, except for Hillsborough and Rockingham County, where we have the highest distribution of veterans, and that it could be as much as I would say 2,000 in those counties that are affected just based on the density of veterans that we have. So that's really all the testimony that I have. We really are in favor of this bill. We think it's a good bill. We think that a general discharge is not necessarily a punitive discharge or a bad conduct discharge. It just means you had an issue in your service, you either overcome it, or the Department of Defense decided it just wasn't working out and let you go. It wasn't really. It shouldn't be a way to continue to punish or I don't want to use the word discriminate. That's not the right word, but have a bias against your military service for just a general discharge. So, do you want to add in?
So I just wanted to add that.
Sir, could you just identify yourself again, please?
Again, my name is Bill Gaudreau. I'm the director for the Division of Veteran Services in the state of New Hampshire. And I just want to kind of reiterate what Deputy Perry mentioned. I served 30 years in the United States Navy, and I met a lot of individuals over that time, and I've never met anybody who joined the military to be thrown out. So most people join the military with the intentions to honor their commitment and honor their country. Unfortunately, things don't always go well when they serve, and they don't always go in a perfect manner. There's lots of reasons why people will be asked to separate from the military under a general discharge, but most of them are not punitive. Most of them are not law-breaking, but that's why we have a bad conduct or dishonorable discharge for those individuals. So general discharge could really honestly be an individual who is doing their best but no longer can meet the standards of the military and basically are asked to part ways. And I found it challenging. The reason why I brought this up to Deputy Adjutant was that the VA does give benefits to general under honorable. So they're getting federal benefits, and I'm getting the calls asking why they're being denied state benefits, why New Hampshire is not recognizing them as a veteran because they have a general under honorable, and I have no answer for them. And that's my testimony.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Yes. Senator Reagan.
So you could be a combat veteran and just get a general discharge?
Yes, sir. But not everybody in the military, not all veterans are necessarily great people, right? They are the standard bell curve of performance and ethics and everything else. But yes, sir, you could go to combat, come back, and for some reason not meet a standard, run afoul of some minor infraction. When I say minor, I mean not criminal, right? An administrative infraction, a small crime, got caught shoplifting, for example, in the PX. And that could result in a general discharge, because it certainly doesn't rise to the level of a dishonorable or a bad conduct discharge. But for shoplifting now, you carry that scarlet letter for the rest of your life. So it's quite possible, Senator.
And to add into that, there is always a possibility if, for example, a single parent in the military, you're required to carry a dependent care certificate. So it's basically it's a nomination as to who's going to take care of your children in the case that you get deployed. If you have nobody to turn your children over to in those regards, the military can choose to separate you, and they would separate you as a general under honorable.
I think that would be a rare case, but it's possible.
Are there any further questions from the committee? Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Senator Carson, and Mr. Perry, good to see you again.
Good to see you
Last time I
too.
saw you was in education, and nice to meet you, Mr. Goodrow. Just a quick question, you mentioned that there could be a local fiscal impact, and this would be, but I don't see a fiscal note with the bill, but what I'm thinking, I just want to go through this train, and Representative Roy might be able to help me, is there's enabling, I used to be a city councilor, there's enabling legislation that allows municipalities to adopt this tax credit, and this would align the definitions of who could get that between the federal and the local, and therefore would be, that's where the local impact would be. Like they're working on one definition now that would change the definition of who they could give this to.
So I think I understand your question, Senator, so I'm going to try my best to answer it. So this would expand the eligibility, the eligible pool for the existing tax credit.
Okay.
Right? So whether or not, and there was some question in the House committee hearings, whether or not the towns would have to go back and revalidate their approval of that enabling those tax credits. And that's a question I can't answer.
Okay.
But the intent of this bill is to expand the eligibility to veterans with the general discharge under honorable conditions.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to align those two up. Thank you. Representative Roy nodded his head, so we're good. Okay.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you both, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the chair will call Kevin Grady.
Oops.
Good morning, Mr. Grady.
Good morning, Senator Carson. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, for the record, my name is Kevin Grady. I'm a 25-year Air Force veteran, and I'm a 22-year resident of the town of Hooksett, New Hampshire. Today, I'm representing the 20 members of the State Veterans Advisory Committee. We do wholeheartedly support this bill. The only thing that I wanted to add, because they've already given you some definitions of general discharges, is one based on my own experience. When I was a commander in the Air Force, I had really one of the best admin troops that I've had my entire time. He'd been in the Air Force about 10 years, but he couldn't meet Air Force weight standards. And the Air Force, when that happens, they put you on a medically supervised program, and they expect you to show progress through this. And if you can't do that, then the prescription is you are administratively separated. And regardless of the fact that your service up to that point has been tremendous, you get a general discharge under honorable conditions. Okay, there are other stories that are like that are out there. And I guess my message to you is people that have a general discharge from the military are not necessarily bad people at all. They might be people that you would certainly want. And if this person was applying for a job in the New Hampshire system and was applying for a government job in that field, I mean, he would be perfect for it. But right now, the people that have honorable discharges would have preference over this person for that in our system. So that's just a couple of the other things that might affect that. And unless you have any other questions, that's really all I wanted to share with you this morning.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
The chair will call Jim Michaud.
Good morning, Senators. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I am the Chief Assessor for the Town of Hudson, Jim Michaud. The Town of Hudson takes no position on this bill, and neither do I. I just have a couple of concerns. I did express some of these concerns at the House level, but a new concern is it's removing honorable discharge as a category to receive a veteran's tax credit. Just looking at the wording, honorable discharge is crossed off, and then it says any discharge under honorable conditions. But under honorable conditions is a specific discharge category. If the intention is to include under honorable conditions in addition to honorable discharge, then I think it would need to be amended. I think that's the intention, is to pick up both categories, to add under honorable conditions. Now, I'm not an attorney. I look at statutes all the time. My concern is a court, a BTLA, will look at this and say, this person shouldn't be getting this credit. So I did not bring this point up at the House because I didn't read it that way, and now I'm concerned that somebody could read it that way just because of the plain words that are on there. So Senator Prentice, you had mentioned about local option or not for this bill. And I got confusing messages from the House on this, from the House committee. Because there's an RSA 72:27-A that deals with the procedure for adoption, modification, or rescission of credits and exemptions. And what it says at the end is, any amendment to a statutory provision has to be adopted by the community unless otherwise expressly required by law. I don't see anything in this bill that says it's expressly required by law. So if the intention is to, for lack of a better word, override the local voters' decisions on granting veterans credits to those with honorable conditions, but to expand it, then I think it would need to be expressly in this bill that way. And so I definitely have a concern on that. And that is actually all I have. I followed the percentages that Office of Veteran Services gave, and that kind of lines up with my research as well. And the fact that this may allow more to receive the credit, they have to be considered an owner of the property. They can't be in an irrevocable trust. They have to apply for it. It has to be the principal residence. So while you have a top number, what we experience at the local level is not everybody applies for it, even though they can. We continuously have people coming in saying, I could have got this for 20 years, and I just didn't know about it. I mean, we put it on the bill, the explanation with the statutory language, the required language with the tax bill. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other members of the public who would like to testify on House Bill 1375? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Pardon? committee will come out of recess. Can I get a motion to go into executive session? Moved by Senator Kavanaugh, seconded by Senator Reagan. What I'd like to do is take a look at the bills that we had today, and then we'll look at the bills that we had last week. The first one we had this morning was CACR 21. I'd like to move on to pass on this. This is I think Judge King did a really good, giving everybody a good background on this. Back in 2011, we passed legislation that completely reorganized our court system, and we did do away with pretty much the office of the probate. They don't really have anything to do, and there have been a number of attempts to pass a CACR to get rid of this office. It's just one of those constitutional offices that are no longer needed, but it is in the Constitution, and we've tried to get rid of it through legislation, and we were sued, and they said, nope, can't do that. Constitution trumps state law, so we just need to have it. So we just keep going through these election cycles of people getting elected to be the registrar of probates, and there is literally nothing for them to do. They do work with the archives, but most of that is all handled by the archive staff and the archivists, the state archivists. So,
yeah. So no one's losing a job. It's an elected office.
Yeah.
And if we would be making basically a policy statement on this, whether it moves forward or not.
No, what we're doing is making it, this is a constitutional amendment.
I know.
We're going to let the people decide whether or not they want to keep it.
Go on the ballot.
It'll go on a ballot.
But if we move it forward,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't have a problem with moving it forward. It doesn't seem like there's.
But the people still vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The people still vote.
The people will have the final say as to whether or not they want to keep this office and keep it as a constitutional office or get rid of it.
That needs 2/3 in the ballot too.
And that's.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'm good with that.
Okay.
I'll second your motion.
Okay. Senator Ricciardi seconds. Is there any further discussion on CACR 21? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And Chantal, I'll take this one out. Okay. Next we had House Bill 275. Pardon? No, because Senator Reagan said no.
Okay.
There's no. Yeah. On 275, I wanted to see what was passed in the budget and see what the difference is between the two. We had a lot of testimony that there was agreements made, and I'm not aware of any agreement that was made.
Through the emails?
Through the emails, and I'm really shocked because we only had one person testify on this bill, and it wasn't even the prime sponsor of the bill. So I had thought we would get a line out the door with all the emails that we had gotten on this bill, and that's why I had allowed a half an hour for this bill. But I would just like to see what was passed in the budget and compare the two and see where the difference is. So I've reached out to Mr. Bossy, and he's going to be getting me that information, and just as soon as we get it, I will make sure that you folks get a copy so you can see what the difference is.
So we're going to put this aside for now?
Yeah, we're going to put this one aside, and we can do it next week.
Okay.
Next is House Bill 1037. We had a bill, is there a motion on this bill? Okay, Senator Reagan moves on to pass. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Senator Ricciardi. The concern I had on this is we had a bill earlier this year. It was Senator Whitley's bill that would have mandated the governor
put all of this on a website.
Put it all on a website, have this information readily available. We already do this. This is already being done. This one puts a time frame. This one gives, you have, provide a list of all expenditures within 30 days of the expenditure. I mean, I don't have a problem doing that. I'm just wondering if it's redundant.
I mean, there was, if I may, so as for Senator Whitley's bill, there was a point in time when it wasn't all as easily accessible
Right.
as we progressed
Mhm.
towards and have now. So that's separate from this. Does it take that long to get this on a website, make it publicly available?
Don't know.
I mean, I didn't.
I don't know, and I think that part of the difference is when we are in the state of emergency, to get that information up on a timely basis, as opposed to a lot of that information coming out a while afterwards.
Later.
But I believe with Gopher, which was the committee that was processing all the emergency funds, that information was up there regularly. But they're not in the governor's office. They were a commission that was doing the work.
I mean, could we make a committee amendment to make it 60 days, if that helps, or do we even need it?
That's my
Anything that
question is,
increases
do we need
transparency
this?
is
Yeah.
good. And especially in this, and again, I think that the times have caught up, but I honestly don't know, like from the time that an expenditure is made, when does that become public record, and specifically from the governor's office versus a specific state agency. And even though Gopher is an office of the governor, it's not always, say, that direct, like, I'm going to spend this money on this during the state of emergency, I think. So, I mean, I'm in favor of it, whether it's 30 or 60 days, and let the two come, two shall meet.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's not a question of 30 or 60. It's that, are we doing this already? Is this redundant? And that's the question that I have about this. I mean, I have no problem with this bill whatsoever. It's just, is this already happening? So, that's all.
I'm just looking it up right now and see how long.
Yeah, you're the only one that brings a computer.
We were talking about that on break. He's
Yeah.
never do.
Because I'm busy looking at this, taking notes, watching everybody.
Just ask me, I'll do the research. I said, New Hampshire Rescue Plan Fiscal Report Transparency Fund. So there is, there's even a heat map for funds that are dispersed.
And what I have is and this was not a unanimous decision from House ED&A. It says, the bill sought to remove two superfluous phrases from the statute regulating the reporting of expenditures by the governor during a state of emergency. The majority of the Executive Departments and Administration Committee also felt the second phrase, in order to ensure transparency, should be intact, and they amended the bill as so. So, I don't have a problem either way with this, so if you folks want to pass this, if there's an ought to pass motion, that's fine.
We have that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion of ought to pass.
I seconded it.
Seconded by Senator Ricciardi. Is there any further discussion on the ought to pass motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Is there a motion for the consent calendar?
So moved.
Moved by Senator Kavanaugh, seconded by Senator Reagan. Is there any discussion on the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Chantel, I'll take this one just because it's, we're gonna do, I like what we did before, with just, with all the consent calendar motions being done by one person. It makes it easier for Chantel, she's not chasing down people trying to get their approval. Next, we have House Bill 1045 relative to the composition of the state's Ethics Oversight Advisory Board. Senator Reagan moves ought to pass, seconded by Senator Kavanaugh. Is there any discussion on the bill? I think it's pretty straightforward. I think the representative did a really good job of explaining why they needed to do an overhaul of the committee, and so I would agree it's ought to pass. Anybody else? Any other comments? Nope. Okay. So we have a motion of ought to pass. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Senator Reagan moves consent, seconded by Senator Kavanaugh. Is there any discussion on the consent calendar motion? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And I will do this one too. Next, we have House Bill 1337.
Second?
Okay, Senator Reagan moves ITL, seconded by Senator Kavanaugh. Is there any discussion on the ITL motion?
I think that, if I may, I just think the department made a compelling case for why this is not an issue. I mean, I think the Department of Unemployment Security does a great job. Our numbers are.
Oh, I agree.
We have even used the term unprecedented, so I think we're good.
Yeah, I can understand why the representative filed the bill thinking that if we lessen the time of unemployment, then we'll have more people going back to work, but you can see that there's really not a lot of correlation between that, so. Okay, so we have a motion of ITL. Is there any further discussion? No. Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? Okay. Senator Reagan moves consent, seconded by Senator Kavanaugh. Is there any discussion on the consent calendar motion? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Again, I'll be doing this one. Okay, next we have House Bill 1344. Okay, Senator Reagan moves ought to pass. Is there a second?
Before I,
Yep.
well, do you want a second if someone's doing it? I just want to.
I'll second it.
Just want to, my wife's a real estate agent. I want to declare conflict, but we'll participate.
Okay. So we have an ought to pass motion on House Bill 1334. I just had a concern because we didn't hear from the realtors, but Mr. Schmidt is here representing the realtors, and he said the realtors support this. So we have ought to pass. Is there any further discussion on the ought to pass motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay,
Second.
Senator Reagan moves consent, seconded by Senator Kavanaugh. Is there any discussion on the consent calendar motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're doing this one. Okay, the last one we have is House Bill 1375, an act relative to the definition of veteran.
Move an amendment to clear up that. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm allowed to talk, or you're looking at me like I can. I think there should be two amendments. One that expressly required this definition be put into the, make it so that the towns don't have to re-approve the new definition. So that's part of it. And then just add the honorable discharge back in to avoid any.
Okay, well, that's going to take a little bit of work, so I don't think we're going to exec this today.
That's fine. I just wanted.
Okay.
But I think those are simple amendments. I would say that while Mr. Bishop's concern about under honorable conditions is not a real concern, I think it's worth clarifying.
Yeah, and I think it's probably, just a few words here and there, but we're going to have to go through that very carefully in order to get it correctly. So, okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we have the bills from last week. Do any of you feel that the bills are ready to come forward?
Let me just take a look.
As ready as today's, huh?
Okay. Okay, let me get rid of the master sheet. Oh, there's gonna be some. Did we ever get that information concerning the sale of the Lakes Region facility? Because I met with Senator Morse about this, and he told me that the governor has $10 million in the budget to reconstitute those facilities. But we didn't get that testimony.
Oh, it was whether we parsed out, okay. That was the concern that I had was, were we committing to something where we didn't know what the expenditure would be?
Well, there's.
If there's money that's set aside for it.
But if
they have to be relocated, if they have to relocate.
I'm just wondering if $10 million is gonna be enough. Do you remember this allocation in the budget?
They were talking about what they were trying to reconstitute.
Okay.
If they have to move the backup 911 center.
Yeah.
From where it is, and Lakes Region Fire Mutual Aid were at least two of the items that came forward. How much would that cost?
Yeah. So I'm wondering if we just take this and pass this on to finance, where they probably have that fiscal information. I'm just, you know, I understand where the problem was, that they, it should have been either exempt or they should have taken it out in the budget, but that didn't happen. So we're left to kind of figure out, we know that the land is gonna be sold, and how they're going to do that, I don't know. And I can't see adding that $10 million or at least that cost onto the sale of the property. Is the property even gonna sell for $10 million? I mean, I don't get it. I mean, this bill is all over the place, but I just don't think that, we just don't have a lot of just information.
It's not ready to be voted on.
Okay, then
Do
we
we do
won't.
interim study instead? I don't know, I mean.
Yeah, but I
I'm-
think if we
let's
don't do
represent it.
something, it could hold up the sale of this land.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. It's just not getting the information.
I told them years ago to just give the land to the county and tell them it's yours.
Yeah, so here, you deal with it.
If you're, I'm ready to vote on HB 1330.
Okay.
I was gonna move that off to pass.
What's 1330?
Oh,
The registration of medical technicians.
oh, we need to discuss this.
Yeah, we need to, so we're gonna hold off on this one on the Lakes region until we can figure that one out. The next one we have is, House Bill 1256 FN, an act relative to positions within the Department of Military Affairs and Veterans Services.
What number is that? I'm sorry.
That is 1256. This renames the position of the cemetery superintendent
Oh, right.
to cemetery director, establishes duties and salary classifications. It alters the list of positions the adjutant general nominates for appointment, and renames the position of administrator of the Division of Community-Based Military Programs to director of the Division of Community-Based Military Programs, and just.
Second.
Okay, this one is fairly good. Okay, so we have a motion of ought to pass. Okay, is there any discussion on the bill? It seems pretty straightforward. Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Consent.
Okay, Senator Reagan moves consent. Okay, and seconded by Senator Kavanaugh. Is there any discussion on the consent calendar motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and I will do this one too.
I have to move 1269 off to pass.
12,
I can't hear what you said.
1269?
an act relative to certain legislative study committees?
Yeah, this is a result of prodigious amount of
Yes.
labor by the, right?
So there was an issue with the marine, the
Fishing game.
marine
Yes.
fisheries.
Yeah, I made a note that we had to wait until April 12th because we needed the Fish and Game Commission input.
Right.
Right, they're
So
gonna meet,
that's-
review it, and then give a
We have
recommendation
to
back.
wait.
Okay,
Yep.
so,
Pushing the deadlines.
okay. Next we have House Bill 1560, an act relative to non-resident licensure by the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology. There was no opposition to this bill. I'm sorry, Senator.
Oh, no, sorry,
Prentice?
I'll wait till you're.
No, I was just gonna say.
I have a meeting tomorrow with Jessica Portrayas from, I think she's from the Institute of Justice, that brought forward, was part of the team that brought forward this bill and the one about the niche beauty services.
Okay, we can hold off on
Yeah,
those.
I want to, for anything that has to do with reciprocity, because that's what this bill is.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that it's apples to apples, and if they're not,
Right.
there's a mechanism. And
Right.
that was my question to her, that she couldn't, I'm not saying this in a degrading way, or a shady way, she couldn't completely, I'm not sure she
Well,
was
she's
clear
new.
on it, so I want
She's-
to know.
she's
No, not the
new.
representative, that,
No, the other person's new.
right, so I want to because if there's a way, actually the representative was too, and I called Representative Power about this, and I have not heard back. I know she's busy, but I'm trying to understand
did
if it's,
too,
if it's apples to apples, and that's
Okay,
what we need to
well,
know.
we can hold
And
off
I
on
also
that.
think they need to have, if they want niche beauty services, they actually need to have a definition of that.
Yeah, I had a lot of difficulty
They
in
did
that bill.
reach out for me to,
Okay.
and I haven't had time to set up anything.
Tomorrow
Oh, no,
morning.
no, we've got a couple more to go through. Okay, I know
They
you,
don't seem to be willing.
but, okay, well, we're talking about them to try to figure out what we want to do. House Bill 1192, an act relative to the Board of Acupuncture Licensing and relative to the qualifications for licensure as an acupuncturist.
I thought everybody, it seemed like they were all, there wasn't anyone that was opposed to that, correct?
Right.
None opposed.
None opposed.
Let's pass.
Okay, so,
Bill McGuire does her due diligence.
Yes, she
Bill
does.
McGuire.
I did have a
So-
constituent, though, that has reached out and was in opposition with his facility. And I sent him all the testimony and everything, that there was no opposition, and I let him know the hearing date, so.
that's all you can
That's,
do.
yeah.
So we have a motion, moved by Senator Reagan, I'll second it, on House Bill 1192. Yes, we'll move ought to pass. Is there any further discussion on the ought to pass motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? Okay. Senator Reagan moves consent, seconded by Senator Kavanaugh. Is there any discussion on the consent calendar motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, let's do this one too. Okay, this one is House Bill 1102 relative to certain committees and commissions of the Department of the State. It removes certain committees and commissions under the purview. This is a housekeeping bill that resulted from a legislative budget audit.
1102, you said?
1102,
Move
yes.
ought to pass.
Second?
Okay, moved by Senator Kavanaugh, seconded by Senator Rishardi. We have an is there any discussion on the ought to pass motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Senator Reagan moves consent. Is there any, seconded by Senator Kavanaugh. Is there any discussion on the consent calendar motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Again, Chantel will be doing this. Okay, next we have House Bill 1182, an act relative to the Board of Court Reporters. Senator Reagan moves ought to pass. Is there a second? Seconded by Senator Prentice.
Yeah, second, sorry, raise my hand.
Okay, so we have the ought to pass. Okay, is there any discussion on the ought to pass motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, is there a motion for consent?
Second.
Moved by Senator Reagan, seconded by Senator Kavanaugh. Is there any discussion on the consent calendar motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I'll do that one. This next one, House Bill 1330, if we could hold that one and House Bill 1171. We are, they're both, 1171 is a fiscal note bill. The other is just a regular, it's a policy bill. We are well ahead of ourselves, so we're just gonna hold on to these. And we will go ahead and schedule for next week, and we will just keep working away.
All right.
So can I get a motion?
Motion to come out of executive
Okay,
session.
Senator Prentice moves to come out of executive session, seconded by Senator Kavanaugh. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all very much.
That's fine, if you want Senator Kavanaugh and Reagan to be in executive session.
Ah, I said consent. If I didn't make a mistake, I would have had you.
Well, how many did we do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's not too bad. We did 10 of them.
Hey, just get
Yep.
one.
Yeah, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the 5 we have next week, that's 11.
Wow.
So lunch, just to drop off.
Real quick judiciary question.
Where do you want to meet? Hey,
The
can I
littering
ask
bill.
about this?